Hello, directors. We're just going to first do a quick sound check. Henny, how's the sound for you? Can you hear us okay? Good stuff. Hi, Maria. Hi, Arnold. Hi, Leah. Okay, great. We're going to do a roll call and then we will start the meeting. Go ahead, Shanna.
Thank you, Director Watson. When I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. And those online, please remember to keep your microphones on mute to avoid any feedback. So we have Director Jackman.
Hello, I am here.
Director Tierney.
Present.
Director Vandenberg.
Hello.
Director Watson.
Present.
Alternate Director Schmidt.
Present.
And I believe Director Newell is off sick.
Yes.
Director Newell, you. Director Cunningham.
Present, thank you.
Director Papa.
Present, thank you.
We have Director Davidoff.
Don't see him there.
Online, one more time, Director Davidoff. Director Hanegraaff.
I'm here.
Thank you. Director Weatherhead. Here. Director McFadden.
Present.
Director DeBoon.
Good afternoon.
Director Hewitt.
I'm present.
Director Zelznick.
Present.
Director Page.
Present.
Director Casely.
Present.
Director Lockwood. Present. Director May.
I am present. Thank you. Good afternoon.
And I believe we have alternate Director Bueller instead of Director Ladd.
Yeah, it's Director Buller. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll move on to staff. We have CAO Warren.
Now you do. You just logged on.
We'll give him a bit of a sound check. CAO Warren, can you hear the boardroom?
Yes, I can clearly.
Thank you. We have General Manager Maloff.
He's joining today.
Late. Manager Wolf.
Present.
Manager Wilson. And Heidi Bench.
Present.
Do we have a Connie Normatsu? Is there anybody on the line I've not acknowledged? All right, I'll turn it back over to Director Watson.
Thank you. So because Director Newell is not present today and he would have been the chair of the committee, we do have to run a quick election to designate a chair of the committee. So procedures bylaw indicates we call an election. So I will do the usual process of calling for nominations 3 times. Director Jackman, go ahead.
Nominate Director Popoff.
Director Popoff, do you accept?
Yes, I do.
And sorry, I'm not watching chat.
I'm watching chat. There's no chat at the moment.
Thank you, Hannah. Calling for a second time, further nominations for chair of this joint resource recovery meeting today only. And for a third time, are there any nominations? By acclamation, Director Popoff, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just give me a few minutes to get set up here.
You have Director Davidoff now, Shanna.
Thank you. We want to do a sound check?
He did a thumbs up, so.
You're good. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, you're good, Andy.
Thank you.
Where is that?
Do you want help with chat today with her?
Yeah, I can keep an eye on it. Okay, good afternoon, directors. I hope Chair Newell is not suffering too much. I did text him this morning or emailed him this morning, and he did say that he is not feeling that well and probably will not be even able to attend virtually. So I believe the meeting was already called to order by board chair, and we'll do the traditional land acknowledgement, that we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. So the agenda has been circulated, and if I can get a motion to adopt the agenda.
There's no addendum. With the addendum, is issued yesterday.
With the agenda,
Moved with the addenda.
with the agenda,
So moved.
which I don't have.
Yep, I can say everybody,
Yes, please.
or if you're up, you need to make sure that it's in these minutes, or this agenda back to you. Now, for today's application, we have to give me 1 second. And then go on to 200.
So we will wait till we get a copy of the agenda.
The addenda is part of e-scribe, so if you adopt that agenda with the addenda,
It'll
it'll
be
be
in
there.
there.
Okay, we can entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda with the agenda. Director Smith and Director Lockwood seconds. Any questions on the agenda with the agenda? Seeing no questions. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. By adopting the agenda, we've received the minutes. And we'll move on to the West Composition Study. And we'll go to Heidi to do a preamble on that for us.
Thanks, and through the chair. In the midst of last summer's heat wave and peak fire smoke, a team of waste specialists from Tetra Tech spent 2 weeks meticulously sorting about 4,400 kilograms of waste from 4 waste generating sectors at Udashinya and Creston landfills as part of the RDCK's first ever comprehensive waste composition study. Waste composition studies are one of the most direct ways to determine the general makeup of waste, allowing for a clearer understanding of waste diversion program efficacy and diversion potential. Waste was characterized to the nearest gram into 11 primary and 59 secondary categories to calculate the waste stream composition and diversion potential for each waste generating sector in each of the east and the central west waste catchment areas, as well as for the RDCK as a whole. Being the first of its kind completed in the RDCK, this study establishes a solid baseline for waste composition in the region. The results of the study identified that just over 65% of the materials currently being disposed in RDCK landfills could potentially be diverted. At least 40% of these materials, equivalent to about 25% of the RDCK's total waste stream, will need to be diverted for the RDCK to meet its annual waste disposal goal of 350 kilograms per capita. The RDCK's current diversion program efficacy appears to be on par with nearby regional districts. This data will be considered alongside service levels when benchmarking the RDCK to other RDs as part of the system efficiency study that is ongoing. The 2023 waste composition data provides evidence that EPR program availability or lack thereof limits the diversion of recyclable materials from landfills. BC's current EPR programming only applies to the residential waste stream, not that generated by the ICI sector. Therefore, the diversion potential for recyclable materials shown for the ICI sector are likely only achievable if the ministry were to update the recycling regulation to include ICI packaging and paper-like products, or if the RDCK were to fully fund ICI recycling. A supplemental waste composition study is planned to be completed in 2028 to evaluate the efficacy of any policies or diversion programs implemented between now and then. Not only will these studies enable data-driven evaluation of new programs such as food waste diversion, But the results of the 2023 study will be used to advocate for broader EPR availability, to refine methane emission calculations in landfill gas generation assessments, and alongside the results of the ongoing tipping fee cost recovery assessment and system efficiency study to inform and refine future waste diversion strategy.
Thank you for your presentation, Heidi. I understand you're finished with the presentation?
Yeah, it was a for information only report.
Okay, do we have any questions? Director Jackman.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, I had a couple, and maybe one of them, Director DeBoon may be able to answer. It's interesting to look at, there's a lot of breakdown, single family residential, ICI construction. In a community like Creston, just as an example though, does the same truck on the same day, like single family residential, as well as maybe some commercial from the restaurants and the like? Like, how do we really know where some of this waste is coming from? How important will that be down the road? Because there's interesting estimates on where this stuff is coming from. But is it going in the same truck in some of these communities?
Hey, Heidi, do you have a response for that?
Yeah, through the chair. So for the waste composition study, the consultants that were on site were able to identify exactly where the waste was coming from by being in communication with the truck drivers who were bringing waste to the site. Typically, the private companies who pick up the residential and commercial in each town do the loads separately. And so we were able to identify residential from commercial. But our scale data doesn't distinguish residential from commercial, especially with what's going into the transfer stations. And so this is a limitation of the study that we are hoping to work on refining a little bit further going forward for the next round of the study. So the data in the study itself is representative of the sectors, but what we would like to get a better understanding to is the portion of our entire waste stream that is being generated by residential versus commercial and construction demo. And so hopefully we'll capture that in the next round.
And so, yeah, that's good. So a driver might say 10 or 20% estimated commercial. That's good. And then obviously we have a lot of work to do on construction, reno, and demolition waste and separating and sorting, but that's all future. I hope we won't wait too many years before we try and salvage some of that material.
Thank you, Director Jackman. I am developing a speaker list now, but I see a comment in chat from Director Hanegraaff. And the comment is, what's going on? So do you want to follow up on that one, Director Hanegraaff?
Well, no, Heidi finished her report and then there was absolutely nothing on our end. So I think you forgot to unmute yourself. It's fixed now.
Okay, well, thank you. That was an oversight on my part. I did mute the office here and I forgot to unmute it when I was speaking. So we'll go on. The speakers list is Director Watson, Director Smenk, and Director Weatherhead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted, it's an observation more so. This is, so I'm not sure that any staff will have an answer to this, but I do know going through the resource recovery plan that definitely diversion was important. Getting those numbers down is very important. So I don't discount any of that. But what does raise a flag for me is I know in Central alone, we're subsidizing organics at about $500,000. And it's the first year, so perhaps that will shift and ideally it will shift. But what I'm concerned with is that the strategies that we're enabling to assess our region are not based on our geographical constraints. So I mentioned this in Central the other day, the organics program's available to anywhere north of Belfour or zero. And so that ability to divert is not being vetted against the actual opportunity to divert. And I think that's where things financially and structurally fall apart for me. We're looking at one aspect, which is critical, but we're not looking at the actual capacity to then provide diverting opportunities. And with the current costs in place for the organics within Central right now, I do not anticipate that it will be affordable to even consider an organics program in the north of Balfour at this point. So I think, through the staff, some input is that our geographical constraints are significant to achieving the kind of classically approached way to reducing greenhouse gases. And we have to get very creative with that. So it's a really good piece of information, but it's missing the context, which is not staff's, no one's fault with that. But I think it tells a story that is a partial truth. So that's just more of a comment.
Thank you. I believe staff has a response.
Yeah, response, just a consideration. The cost that you are quoting for the organics to the Central Subregion is in part because we are only receiving minimum materials right now and don't have revenue that offsets the facility's operation. And the feasibility or non-feasibility of future servicing the new region, for example, in regards to organics, we haven't assessed yet. And we haven't had the discussion. It is more favorable to have a localized small facility, do nothing, or all of the organics waste to a central facility. That assessment hasn't happened. And all along, when we spoke to our organic strategy, it was a step-by-step implementation. Got a little bit pushed down the road in regards to the organics curbside collection in the rural areas. We weren't necessarily ready for it. We had to drop other things in order to get there. But it was all along a strategy that was a multiple-year implementation where we looked at feasibilities, where we started in the core areas with the most material, so meaning the larger municipalities, to have the initial quantities to have a central facility being viable. Currently, we are not getting these materials yet, and that is part of the picture why we are seeing that relatively high cost to subsidize the organics.
Supplemental?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And just to note, you have to up on the list.
Okay.
So, we do have a motion for North Kootenay Lake to be assessed for feasibility of organics program that was put through a couple of months ago. So I know that's on the work plan, and that's great. It'll be interesting to see what that comes out on. We did do our own kind of preliminary work, so we see that to work with. The concern I was highlighting is that when you look at the current cost of delivering this service, not just organics, but the whole central resource, and I think of new services being added down the road, I'm very concerned we've already hit our cap on available funding via using land use assessment. So my concern is more so, yes, we'll do the feasibility, we'll get an idea of what it costs, looking at what the current costs are on our services. We, for me, hit that point of we can't keep increasing costs, and the cost of a new organics program is going to be significantly more. It's a judgment, but I'm just flagging that it's already more expensive than we can really afford. So that's my concern. And yes, noted the 500,000 is related to the first year of operations, and we very much hope to see that number go down in the future, and that a lot of people are using it to help with that. So hopefully that is not the same number next year.
Just to add to this, part of the picture is going to be not necessarily don't do anything new, but weigh whatever we do new to what we are doing currently. So there may be current practices that we need to drop because they are less efficient in regards to environmental benefits than what we do going forward, i.e. organics versus recycling, food waste management, and
Okay, thank you, Manager Wolf. Amy, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, and it's on the stream is that the thing, one of the bigger takeaways that I get from this is looking at how much diversion is still available in here. And one of the big ones is compostable organics, and especially in the ICI sector, which we have little to no participation in currently. And so that seems to me like a fairly low hanging fruit that will encourage meeting a lot of the goals we have, plus help to reduce the cost per ton at the facility that we built and we sized based on the volumes created here. So we need to, staff is engaging with the ICI sector, and that'll be one of our big focuses this year.
Thank you, Amy. We'll move right along. I think your concern has been noted. Thank you. Director Snyder.
Thank you, Chair. I guess through the staff, the question that I really went through my mind when I read through the report was, when were the samples taken? My life, on Saturdays, families have more time. And does that have an influence on the type of materials that enter our landfill? And would that have an influence on how we develop programs or services?
Through the chair, the study was designed so that a sufficient number of samples were taken, that there shouldn't be any, what's the word I'm looking for, like bias based on the day that things were collected. So it was run over a period of 2 weeks, like every day for a period of 2 weeks.
That's your question.
It does answer my question, and just the comment, by mixing it all, you get less information.
Thank you. So we'll move on with the speakers list. Director Weatherhead.
Oh, thank you. Through the chair to Heidi, excellent report and study I found very interesting. My lens brought me into really noticing the difference of the lower percentages in specifically paper, plastic, organics, and household hygiene, the much lower percentages in the transfer stations than there were in the landfills. And I just was just curious as to what kind of story that tells us. Is it just because they don't live closer to city centers where they can buy more things that creates more garbage in those areas, or are they better at composting, or what, I just was curious about the story that told.
So Heidi, do you want to respond to that, or is there somebody from staff that can respond?
I can, but I think Heidi will probably have a better answer for it.
Thank you.
Yes, through the chair. So I'm just looking at the graph now. Sorry, you said that at the transfer stations in comparison to at the landfills? Do you mean like at the single family residential compared to the transfer station?
Sorry, I meant single family residential percentages for paper, plastic, organics, and household hygiene. Those percentages were quite a lot smaller than the transfer station percentages. I just wondered what story that told. You're not able.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of variables that could be in play. And so obviously there's no way for us to know 100%, but assumptions we could make are that there are different items that are used differently rurally versus in urban areas. Additionally, the access to the recycling programs is different at transfer stations versus in urban areas with curbside pickup, where the curbside pickup only applies to certain materials. I think that is probably one of the more important observations, is that transfer stations, people can typically bring all of their recyclables, and so maybe more of those recyclables get captured in the recycling and don't end up in the landfill. So those are some thoughts on that, but it's difficult to say 100% why things are happening.
Sorry, just wait a second. That cancels the sound out. If you want to just finish that, and then they can keep. You're good.
So Heidi, are you finished?
Yeah, sorry. Was that not, could you not hear that?
No, we've got everything you said, but somebody wanted to speak at the boardroom, and that kind of interrupted what you were saying, but I believe you're finished. Director Weatherhead, are you comfortable with the answer? And I've got
Yes, I was.
Amy that will expand on it. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. And Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, but the transfer station percentages include a lot more C and D in the overall loads, so that those things skew the other materials to be lower percentages than what you'd see in the landfill, where that would be, so that the single family residential would be the materials that get dropped at the transfer area at the landfill. And so the bigger C and D loads from the landfill would go separately, so they would get combined in that material. So that also skews those percentages, correct?
Heidi, do you want to respond?
Yeah, that does skew it slightly. I did run a data analysis adjusting for the CND in the transfer station data just to see how much, and the difference was not significant. So there were still higher values of recyclable materials in the more the urban, like single family residential than there were in the transfer stations, even once we adjusted for the higher volumes of CND.
Thank you. So we'll move on with the speakers list. Director David Hoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was an interesting report because the Odishanya landfill used to be a place where we would take dates and show them the bears and stuff. You know, so you'd have about 6, 7, 8, 9 bears there. But that little station there with the hand sorting, I know Henny's laughing, but we used to have a gentleman. His name was Joe, and he made a living by hand sorting through garbage at the Odishanya landfill. And then he'd advertise on Trader Phone on our local radio station every week, and he had a whole long list of stuff. But so I'm thinking of Joe right now. I'm thinking of him looking at this hand sort. He'd be in heaven if everything got laid out for him and he could go through every single garbage bag and every truckload and everything else. So excellent job, really good insight. I'm just looking at the menu of what's at each landfill. And the ICI thing really bugs me. We've been talking about it for far too long. And I remember Chair Kettle saying a long time ago, we got to send somebody a bill. And guess what? I still believe that we got to send somebody a bill because the way it's not working. We're still paying for stuff. Our ratepayers are paying for stuff that they shouldn't be paying for, that shouldn't be in the landfill, or if it's going to come, we need to get more money, and that's the ICI problem is a problem that continues to this day. So I don't know how we fix it, but sometimes sending somebody a bill is symbolic, but maybe that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Director David. And I believe our Chair Watson mentioned that we should send somebody a bill because we are taxing our residents far more than we're getting compensated for what we do. But Director Kearney, did you have your hand up? Okay, Director Lockwood, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, my question to staff is we keep talking about that we've started this program and we haven't got the people using the organics yet. Although I know of 2 businesses in Salmon Area G that have gone up to be able to use the organics, to be told that it's still not ready for everybody else. It's just haulers that are bringing in. So when are we going to be able to tell the residents that they can start using the organics?
So who from staff wants to field that question?
Through the chair, we should be accepting that currently. I'm not sure why particularities of that situation, but if maybe we can check on that for
When can I ask?
Yeah,
when did it start? Because this was obviously with this being on the agenda, it's been brought, but this was probably what's this month? December, probably the end of October, November. So when did we start accepting it? So I understand.
Through the chair, it was mid-January, February 17th.
Oh,
The news release.
of this year?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can pass that on to them because they don't know that yet.
Okay, any further questions? Director Weatherhead for the second time, go ahead.
Thank you so much through the chair to Heidi. Is there any benchmarking with, say, a large city center like Surrey that has had all of the diversions in place for numerous years and probably are well educated now. Did you benchmark ever with the bigger centers on studies like this, or did you comparisons?
Through the chair, we are doing a benchmarking. I included some, I guess, of our neighboring regional districts. I hadn't included any of the urban ones just because their collection services and just the landscape is so different than here that it can be hard to draw similarities between the two. But I can pull that data. Most RDs have done this, and so I can pull probably a report from a more urban one and determine that if that's something that you'd like.
Thank you. I just was curious. No, it's fine.
Well, thank you for the response, and we've got Director Watson, and then we'll have to move on to the next item. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this one in case Heidi leaves, because I'm not sure. What I wanted to ask was in regards to the letter that we have later on the agenda regarding EPR programs and the overall impacts to rural areas. I think it would be really prudent to also include, based on this diversion strategy, what do we have no options to divert because we don't have EPR programs in the area where we're not getting servicing. So I'm curious to Heidi if that would be easy to pull out, or is that something staff could do? And when we get to the letter, we can consider including that.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Through the chair. Sorry, so just to ensure I understand, you're looking to pull out the data for like a specific municipality or area?
I'm looking to pull the data where, from a diversion perspective, we could divert this. But due to the fact that EPR programs are not fully servicing any of our areas, that we don't actually have a different stream for that to go into. So it again remains in our landfill. So it's not specific to one of the jurisdictions in RDCK. It's specific to what could we divert, but we can't because there's no EPR support to take it. Does that clarify?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I guess we can look at the material types because they broke it down by material type in such a detailed way in the report. We can look at the material types of things that should be recyclable but aren't covered by EPR. And that would give us an indication as to how much is ending up in our landfills because there's no EPR program available.
Thank you. And the clarification on that is the EPR program is not available as a whole, but then also the EPR programs that are servicing our regions.
Yeah, just to follow up on that question, are we monitoring that at all?
Sorry, are we monitoring?
The possibility of diverting this stuff because we don't have EPR, we're putting it into the landfill. So are we monitoring how much we are putting in the landfill versus having an ability to divert
it? Through the chair, I believe Akane would be able to answer that question a lot better than I would, just as she's our recycling technician, and so she knows all of the ins and outs of recycling and EPR.
So, okay,
I have to ask for clarification because what is it what we really have in mind, and when do we define something as inaccessible, and which materials are actually at a quantity where it makes sense to track from a tonnage perspective? EPR programs available, yeah, we know we have in Creston, for example, a situation where even their population basis would have entitlement to certain programs that are not in place, and that some of these EP programs are hoping to establish. But if we try to quantify rural areas, I don't know, that don't have access to an electronics program, for example, or certain electronics program, because there's 3 different ones in the end. How do we quantify non-access? Is somebody living in Caslo having a depot in Nelson? Do we consider that as no access? It's difficult access, no doubt about it, but is that no access, and we count that as a tonnage that is caused because of the distance? You know, the criteria are not there for us to even try to filter that, which population doesn't have access, under which criteria. We would have to establish criteria for non-access And then we have to look at what programs are where. We would have to create maps that show then based on these criteria, exclusion areas. That's a huge exercise to do. That's for us practically impossible to determine for each of these programs, given the difference in availability of these programs in the different areas. And it changes all the time. The map changes all the time. Depots closing or opening for certain EPA programs. How many do we have? 8, 9 different EPA programs? EPR programs?
14.
Sorry?
14.
14. But some of them are as well, from a volume perspective, simply so small that that you couldn't even count them. Some are not materials that should go to the landfill, period, like mercury switches or fluorescent lamps. That is a very difficult exercise to do.
Okay, since I opened that door, Director Watson was going to be the last speaker, but now Director Watson supplemental, and then I've got Director Jackman, and then we'll close the door and we'll continue.
Thank you. Well, what we've done is we've identified what could be divert, but is currently going in the landfill. I'm completing that gap by saying what we can divert, but doesn't have another stream to go to. I get you need metrics to determine that. And if you use the Recycle BC metrics alone, 60 kilometers from a depot is your metric.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's pretty clear to say, like, it's misleading, which was my opening comment, to say, here's what we can divert, without including the context of, but there's no programs for this, and this isn't possible, and there's no organics over here. So it's an incomplete, it makes it look like we're just being lazy residents that aren't diverting where we should be. We need to identify where are the actual opportunities to divert available and where are they not, which is a point to our EPR letter.
So
Manager Wolf has a response.
Yeah, I mean, Recycle BC is a large volume program, right? So there it makes sense to track accessibility, and we have criteria. But every program has actually different access criteria, or can have different access criteria, different volumes, different locations for depots. So like I said, if you look strictly at the large volume EPR programs like Recycle BC, that's doable. But if we try to expand that out to the smaller volume, very few depot programs, it becomes a very difficult exercise.
Thank you, Manager Wolf. Director Jackman, go ahead.
Thank you. I think almost more important than worrying about where we do or don't accept something under the current program is the huge change that we were pushed on us when we stopped our old system. We are accepting packaging printed paper now. So we used to recycle kids' toys, pull the metal axles out, the springs out of the little horn or whatever, and throw bulky kids right on toys and stuff into the plastic bin. They have a label, no caption anymore. Always been recyclable, but the province, with a stroke of a pen, said that's now garbage unless you can give it away. And similarly, lawn chairs and other things are continually bulky going into garbage. So the province might think we're the best in the country for EPR for packaging of products, but the products themselves often could simply be recycled. And I find interesting the non-compostable organics, they have clothing. This is not plastic, but a lot of clothing is also plastic now. So the province is a leader in one area and, in my mind, totally dismiss the other opportunities. And that would be a message I would love to give to Minister Heyman again and ask, when is he going to start requiring one of these consortiums start picking up the products that are also so easily recycled?
I think the last sentence, Director, through the chair, is key. Are they really easily recyclable? And we cannot forget why we ultimately, years after most others, switched to a Recycle BC program, because we had no confidence anymore that significant quantities of what we collected were actually going back into a product. The single stream collection was part of the problem, but the other problems is if you go and say, I collect all plastics, it becomes very difficult to make a recoverable product out of them. That starts with clothing, kids' toys, whatever. In most cases, we can't easily determine what type of plastic it is. You have many different types of plastics. And the goal has to be that whatever we collect at a great cost and transport at a great cost, ultimately to a very large percentage gets back into a product. Otherwise, we have missed the goal, in my opinion.
Easy supplemental. Texas said, let's make railway ties out of plastic composites, and they were able to take huge amounts. We don't seem to have that kind of creative solution to some of these amorphous plastic products, which you don't need to sort it. Credit cards are also made from a combination of plastics. That's why they disintegrate too quickly. Our minister is start thinking about that again. But obviously, Chair, you need to move us along.
Thank you, Director Jackman. And I recall this conversation. We've had it many times, and we still got our goal, and one day we'll get to our goal. Anyways, we'll move right along. Item number, we're writing all over, but it's item number 4. Landfill gas assessments, Creston Central and Oceania landfills. And that, again, is yours, Heidi.
Thank you. And through the chair, as required by provincial regulation, staff retained a qualified professional to complete landfill gas generation assessments for Creston Central and Udashinya landfills in 2023. The purpose of these assessments is to estimate the methane emissions at each landfill for the subsequent 5 years to determine if management of landfill gas is required. All 3 of the assessed landfills were estimated to remain below the 1,000 ton threshold that would require further landfill gas management throughout the assessment period. Based on this, supplemental assessments will need to be completed in 5 years, but no further action is required at this time. As part of Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan, Environment and Climate Change Canada has been developing a federal landfill methane emission regulation. This regulation is anticipated to be more stringent than the current provincial regulation, lowering the threshold that would require implementation of landfill gas management to 664 tons. It should be noted that while this value is significantly lower than the provincial threshold of 1,000 tons, the proposed federal regulation has its own modeling tool to estimate methane emissions. The draft version of the federal tool appears to estimate methane generation values that are slightly lower than the BC modeling tool. So while the estimates provided in the current assessment for Udashinya are already greater than 664 tons, these were calculated using the BC modeling tool. The draft federal model estimates that Udashinya won't pass that 664 threshold until 2025. Therefore, while it's anticipated that emissions at Udashinya may surpass the provincial threshold during the next assessment period, they'll likely surpass the proposed federal threshold much sooner. Based on the most recent information session on the proposed federal regulation, this means that Udashinya would be required to implement a landfill gas management system by 2033. RDCK's other landfills are not anticipated to pass either threshold and therefore would not be regulated to manage landfill gas. Unless the BC government updates the provincial regulation and applies for an equivalency agreement, RDCK landfills will need to comply with both regulations. To mitigate health and safety concerns and reduce the RDCK's carbon footprint, the RDCK voluntarily installed a passive candlestick flare at Creston landfill in 2014. In the past, emissions reductions by this flare directly impacted the value of the climate action grant that the RDCK received. While the emissions reductions by the flare still need to be quantified to help the RDCK meet its climate action goals, current grant funding under LGCAP, the new funding program, is no longer directly tied to the quantification. As such, staff feel it would be cost-effective and sufficient operationally to reduce the flare inspection and emissions reduction quantification by a qualified professional from annual to biannual, which would reduce the costs from approximately $12,000 a year to every other year. Historically, this cost has been paid by the East Subregion out of Service 186. However, it should be noted that the entire RDCK benefits from the reduced carbon footprint of this project. According to Sperling Hansen's landfill gas specialist, it's estimated that the cost to install a landfill gas management system for a landfill the size of Udashinya would start at $2 to $3 million, plus costs for ongoing operation and maintenance. Several options exist that could potentially help to subsidize landfill gas management, including greenhouse gas offsets and landfill gas utilization. In 2023, the RDCK received $134,000 in LGCAP funding. Staff are recommending that up to $10,000 of funding be used to cover the cost of a feasibility study that would identify potential funding and revenue opportunities for landfill gas management. Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. So I guess the direction you're looking for is the recommendation that's on the agenda, is that correct? I see you nodding your head. So rather than have a discussion prior to moving the recommendation, I would prefer that we move the recommendation, get it seconded, and then we can have a discussion. So can I get somebody to move it? Director Page, seconder? Director Jackman, moved, seconded. Now we'll open it up for discussion. Go ahead, Director Page, you're the first one on the list. Then I've got Director Jackman and Director Lockwood. Was that you lifting your hand?
Please.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Through the chair to Heidi, to staff. You talk about the reports receiving credits if we implement reduction strategies before we are mandated and regulated to do so. My question is, as the rate of methane production increases with the size of the landfill, do we retain the access to receive those credits over the long term, or do we just get to a certain volume of production and become qualified from those credits?
So,
yeah, through the chair. So as soon as we pass the regulatory threshold, you're no longer eligible for those credits, unfortunately. So there's a very small window that you're eligible for those credits. If you can get any, they just could potentially help offset some of the costs of implementing the system.
Great, thanks.
So, okay, thank you, Director. And
Maybe I can add to this. So there's a couple of pieces to that picture. One is that with the increasing organics diversion, we slow this rate down on additional production. The criteria may likely change very quickly. I believe it's in the report where we go from the provincial threshold of 1,000 tons to the 660 or whatever the federal guideline is. So there's a couple of unknowns here that we need to consider in all of this. If we talk about the greenhouse gas credit, greenhouse gas credits and getting them, yeah.
Got it.
okay, thank you. Director Jackman.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I can still see what it's going to say with this motion on the table. It's fine. Yeah, if it's a grant, we can start doing work, but that takes staff time. In my mind, Fortis needs to do most of this work, at least in terms of Creston. They declined to take our gas or methane that we're flaring now. They should be embarrassed if nothing else and do their own design, complete their pipeline upgrades, do whatever they have to do and start taking that off their hands. And I know that staff have tried in that down that avenue, but I would hate to see us be the lead in what Fortis in the 2030 and 2050 plans have said they want to do anyway. I know it's not a lot of gas, but it should be their work. And then tied to that, if we can get Fortis to do that, can we reduce our I don't know if we can eliminate the flare, which is expensive, or somehow reduce our maintenance on the flare and not be reliant on it as much. So I want Fortis to do the upfront work and hope you can see some savings on that operation of the flare, testing and engineering review of that flare.
Thank you. Do you have a response to it?
In regards to Fortis doing the gas assessment, I don't think that's going to happen. They don't have the data. They need that data from us. Having said that, landfill gas assessment and theoretical model and actual captured landfill gas at a landfill have been historically always very different. The practical gas quantities captured at landfills, any project I know, any project that I have tracked or been involved, are always significantly less than what is the theoretical model. And even with adjustments of the models, they typically stay different. In regards to reduction of the cost of maintenance, Amy, maybe you want to weigh in, or Heidi, in regards to, you have actually already taken steps and identified some in your budget. Can you speak to that, or I don't?
Correct, through the chair for me. We have reduced the, to every other year, some of the work and some of the ongoing work. Heidi and others will be getting trained on how to do some of that stuff. And so we'll be able to take in some of the annual maintenance and assessment ourselves and then move to the bringing in a professional to every other year. So we've already made that change to reduce the cost.
Director Jackman, a supplemental?
The biggest cost, it's still not being reduced, and it's spelled out here for Sterling Hanson. I think 2,000 is every other year. And we have fresh data. Give it to Fortis, let them look at it. I think it's quantifying what we are flaring. Let them take a shot at it. I'll leave it there because I think I've said this every year for 5 years. We've got a fresh report. Love to see Fortis be proactive. Walk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah, thank you, Director Jackman. Manager Wolf has a response.
Very briefly, I mean, realistically, the quantities in Preston are not feasible for any kind of pipeline project, which that would be for this unit. They have done that several years back on the Salmon Arm landfill, totally underestimating the cost of the gas conditioning through pipeline conditions, and that I'm certain, I looked at the Salmon Arms quantities would be lot higher than what we capture in Preston. I think if anything is feasible, then it would be an on-site use, something has been done in other areas, i.e. greenhouses that use the gas both for heating and in part the CO2 as potential positive impacts to the growth of plants. That has been done on sites, and that is a relatively inexpensive process and equipment, and it can be scaled to the actual production of gas on site.
Thank you. And we're moving right along. Director Lockwood.
Thank you. As the last chair said, he talked about something about 5 years ago. I'm going to talk about something 6 years ago that I brought to the table and new directors don't know about it. As I talked about sustained technology. We would not be talking about what we're going to do in the future of how to reduce gases, because all of our garbage and possibly every bit of recycling would be able to go into something that is not being buried that we have to deal with later on. So I probably won't be here 6 years from now, but I would hope that staff, the board of the day, is actually looking at stop burying garbage, because this is not the future of running after grants to figure out how to reduce methane gas, because grants are not sustainable. We have talked about our budget just in Central, never mind East and West. When are we going to stop chasing grants to try and reduce methane gas when we haven't proven yet in the 10 years that I've been following this, we haven't proven yet that we've decreased anything, because people are buying more. People have more money to buy and people are buying more. So I'm just going to say, for all the new directors, I'm talking about sustained technology. It's a plant that's in Canada, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Director Lockwood. I'll just make a comment on that. You brought this up a few years ago. I think we did look at a technology that was up and coming, I think about 10 or 12 years ago, if I recall, when I was chair of West, there's Blue something that we were going to do in landfill at Ojashinya. We did not have the volume, and it would not have been cost efficient to do it at that time. So appreciate your comments. It's still in the back of my mind, and I'm sure it's as staff is looked at different technologies to a certain degree, but Manager Wolf, if you can respond.
Absolutely. Comments are largely the same that I made 6 years ago. That's cost of the technology, but actual proven technology in the real world. And Last time I checked on Sustain, they are not much further than they were 6 years ago. I don't see a large scale facility that is doing real world only and can be replicated in other areas. So I'm hoping I'm wrong because I'm watching this for 25 plus years. These technologies come and go with huge claims. I mean, the other one was a simple incineration process, but even that disappeared pretty quickly. We get on a monthly basis, meanwhile, actually local people claiming they are part of very innovative technologies and invest in us and have us follow you. So I personally in that industry for, it's now well over 30 years, I only trust technologies that I can touch and see the actual outcomes before I would, as a small municipality, invest in any of these technologies.
Thank you, Director Lockwood, and it's good that you did bring it up. And I trust staff is continuously looking at new technologies, something that would work for our particular area. Director Page, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to offer an amendment that I think we can be pretty quick about whether we like it or not. I'm always of the mind, we do ask for these partnerships, even if it's on repeat. So I've offered that and add further that the board requests for its partner with RDCK to complete the feasibility study in support of its long-term strategy to implement renewable natural gas infrastructure. I would second.
Okay, so you'll have to repeat your amendment so our secretary can type it in and then read it back to us, make sure we've got the amendment correct.
And further, the board requests for its partner with the RDCK to complete the study, complete the feasibility study in support of its long-term strategy, maybe their long-term strategy to implement renewable natural gas infrastructure, which I believe is what you're referencing. Yeah.
So we have a seconder to that amendment, and I don't know if that amendment is in order, but sure.
That amendment is.
It's on change direction, right?
No, it's adding an additional component to
Okay.
the direction, and you have the adopt on speaker.
Okay, so we've got an amendment. We've had a seconder to the amendment. And now we're speaking to the amendment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Director Vanderwerf?
Yeah.
Or did you want to speak to the main motion?
They're the same.
Okay, so you're speaking to the amendment.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
I
procedurally,
thought it was,
Let's just do the amendment.
because it's in chat and you're not on there, can we ask Shannon to please put the amendment in chat? Sorry to interrupt you, Chair.
Okay. And not everybody here is in chat.
Oh, maybe it's for. Oh, yeah, you might have to bring it up if I put it in, then you might all be able to see it.
It's just for the directors online. I'm on chat.
Okay.
Put it in there.
You put it in chat?
Yep, I hit the little.
Okay.
There you go.
Hey, going back to the amendment. Director Page made the amendment. Director Jackman seconded the amendment. We have it in chat now, so everybody that's online can see the amendment. And now for the people at the boardroom, can you read out the amendment?
And further, that the RDCK partner with FortisBC to complete a feasibility study in support of its long-term strategy to implement landfill gas management.
Okay, so now we've read the amendment. Discussion. Go ahead, Director Page.
I think we want to put request
Yes.
for its partner.
RDCK request
It's a letter that we harass for.
FortisBC partner with the RDCK to complete a feasibility study.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read that in its entirety?
And you got that in chat?
I put this one back in chat, the amended, sure.
Normally, I would ask you to write out the amendment and give it to the secretary, but with such an efficient secretary that we've got, Shannon just can do it right away for us.
We're humming on the same wavelength.
Way to go. So moved, seconded, now discussion on the amendment. Director Vanderbilt.
Thank you, through the chair. Is there an assumption this is a 50-50? Because this statement would suggest that if there's some interest with the partnering, there would be some negotiation that would go into that, what that would look like. And is it then safe to assume that our administration staff would manage that amendment or negotiation? And that's to the amendment. But my comment is, it's all about, when it comes to this sort of thing, it's all about timing and technology. And are we comfortable or confident that technology is even there yet for us to entertain this? It may be, and if there's some nods in the room, that's great, then this conversation is worth having. But it may be that the timing is wrong, that we should pull back, refrain from spending any more money on this until we have a good sense, and then there's some nods around in the room that maybe there is a good sense that this conversation is worth having. So, question and a comment.
Thank you. So are you speaking against the amendment?
Decided yet.
Okay.
But I have a question.
Yes, so the part of the question in regards to technology. So the technologies generally are available and have been long tested. The question is it available in Otoshania? So in Otoshania, where we have higher gas quantities as the larger landfills, we have nothing in place yet. Right? We don't have landfill gas wells in place, no collection lines, nothing of that nature yet. This feasibility study was more to say, what could we do? When do we do it, and how quick do we do it? I believe with the new regulations on the horizon, we will be forced relatively quickly to do landfill gas capture on that landfill anyhow. And with a commitment as an organization that we have made in regards to greenhouse gas limitations or elimination or reductions, that is probably very much in line with what our strategic priorities all along have been outlined. So the landfill gas capture does come, and that's why we have not started it yet, does come with some operational inefficiencies, because the only option we currently have is either vertical wells, which is the standard technology to collect it, but they are sitting in the midst of your landfill mass and you have to work around them. Or you can have horizontal landfill gas lines that you build into it. And again, the operations work around these lines. And they are more of a temporary nature. They are typically used for 5 to 10 years. And then because of differential settlement, typically lose their efficiency. So gas capture, and then the third element to that is you typically bring your gas collection line outside of your landfill body on the edge of the landfill. We haven't reached that edge of the landfill yet. That is part of the design and operations plan that we are trying to entertain this year and complete this year. Where does what equipment go? What do we expand to? Where's our final line of the landfill footprint? What do we need to do on the slopes and the land? Part of why we have done that, not yet, is because it's held up in part in regards to the land application that we need to complete to obtain additional buffer lands around the landfill to be able to do that. So there's certain steps that need to come in sequence where we are not there. Unfortunately, this landfill has been developed in a way where it isn't conducive to this type of technology. But sooner or later, and I'm convinced fairly quickly, we will have to take first steps from a legislative perspective. That's part of this report.
Okay, you want to supplement?
Yes, please. what is a reasonable period of time that you think getting a response back from FortisBC on this motion would be?
If I may,
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know, I'm more afraid we get a blank stare from them, because typically when we approach them, most of this work is done and saying, we come to you, natural gas by this date of this quantity, and now come into the boat and work with us to do X, Y, Z with the steps.
Okay.
They are not normally on the front end of projects. You can ask, and maybe because they have established targets for renewable gas as a certain quantity in their overall gas portfolio. Maybe they are hungry enough to work with us, but we don't know until we ask. But there's a good chance we get a blank stare and we just say, at this point, what can you actually tell us?
Thank you, Manager Wolf. I've got two speakers on the list, and Director Davidoff and Director Main. So Director Davidoff, I did not catch you. Were you going to speak to the main motion or the amendment?
I'd like to speak to the amendment, Chair, and then I make a comment.
Yes, go ahead, Director Davidoff. You've got the floor.
Yeah, I support the amendment, but we've been on this, at this rodeo before. Having sat at the board for a few years, we keep going around and around the merry-go-round here. And we've talked about exactly this before, and it got us nowhere. But I still say it's worth a try, and I agree with Manager Wolf. Like, we're going to get a blank stare. And then we're going to get, well, how much is the RDCK willing to pay to do something? And that's been Fortis's response on anything I've gone to, is that, okay, if you guys want to pay for that, we'll look at it. But the other part, I think this current crop of JRCC committee members are getting cheated a little bit, because when we used to bring in these really exotic plans that people had for taking and dealing with garbage. I mean, that was some of the most interesting meetings we ever had. Some of the plans were just unbelievable. It was worth the price of admission. So just make that comment, Chair. And yes, I do support this amendment, because I think we will look back in our minutes. We've done exactly this before. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Davidoff. Director Main.
Thank you, Chair Popoff. I'm speaking to the amendment, and I'm absolutely in favor of it. I tried to bring this to the attention of Resource Recovery 6-7 years ago, and it has been brought repeatedly. We lose nothing by asking. Fortis has an interest in being on top of the newest technologies. They may know something that we don't know at this point. So I absolutely support the amendment.
Thank you, Director Main. So on the amendment, any more speakers on the amendment? Okay, everybody in favor of the amendment? Anybody opposed? See no opposition, the amendment's carried. Now back to the main motion as amended. That the board directs staff to apply to the Local Government Climate Action Program, LGCAP, fund for a grant to complete a feasibility study that would investigate options to financially support future landfill gas management at the Crescent and Otishenya landfills, and further. You read out there and further, Shannon.
And further, that the RDCK request FortisBC partner with the RDCK to complete a feasibility study in support of its long-term strategy to implement landfill gas management.
Okay, now on the main motion as amended. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing no opposition, carried. Now we're going going back to recycling depot lease agreements, and we have a report there. So, Kane, do you have any additions to that report? Okay, so the report is quite straightforward, and we have 3 recommendations. So I'll entertain a motion for the first recommendation. Director Cunningham, seconder. Director Turney. I'll read that recommendation, that the board authorize staff to renew the lease contract with the city of Nelson for Nelson Lakeside Recycling Depot for the term of January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2025 at the cost of $63,974 per year. And further, that the cost be paid from service number A117 Central Recycling. Discussion. Director Watson, go ahead. Sorry, I kind of have a hard time looking
That's
at my
okay.
left.
I do it to Director Blewett all the time when I'm sitting here. I have a questions. The first one is, noted the sheer difference in leasing costs between all the depots. I imagine waterfront, larger parcel. What was the original lease agreement with this property? Because I believe it significantly increased 2 years ago. Is that correct? Through the staff, and then I have one more question.
So does anybody from staff want to respond?
I think it was a 3-year agreement. For the 3 years, it was locked in at $43,000 annually, I believe, something like that. And it's now to go to 60 some. The lease cost is established. The city, as a formula, has used the assessed value of the property at 5% of assessment value and 78% of the area of the parcel, I believe, as the baseline for determining the cost of the $60-some thousand. So the last increase was 3 years ago to the 40-some. Before that, we may actually have not paid at all. But
that was my point.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I did understand the way the formula was determined for this one. I don't believe it's the same formula used in the other ones, because I think it would be significantly more if it was the same formula. So who set the lease? And to clarify, before the $43,000 3-year commitment, it was $0 that we were paying for the lease. So we went from 0 to 43,000 now to 63,000 based on assessment. And do the other leases use assessment as well? And have they all increased at the same level?
I believe it is the only depot that uses assessment values as a basis for the charge. So I can't say in any detail how the other rates of leases are established. Some of them include operational support or snow removal or things like that. That's not the case here, but I can't speak to the other leases in regards to how the lease cost is being determined.
Final question?
Go ahead.
Sorry, my first. Anyway. So the final question is that should we decline this? We don't actually have the option to decline this, because we would have to move the depot immediately, not long term. So we're making a decision on something we don't have a choice on. I'll just remain opposed. Thank you.
Hey, I do have a speakers list, and I kind of jot them in that order, right? I do have Director Davidoff, Director Cunningham, Director Lockwood, Director Smink. Go ahead, Director Davidoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Now that we're looking at these kinds of numbers for some leases, and I'm sure this is going to be a trend we'll be looking at more, I have a question to the CAO. Is the CAO on the line? Yes, I see Stuart's name. So my question is that have we looked at the kind of option to purchase provision in these types of leases where at least a portion or percentage of the lease cost could apply to the acquisition of the property if we're going to be there long term? So that's that's something that, do we do that anywhere? Or now that we're looking at this kind of a cost, should we be looking at that type of an option clause in these types of leases? I hope that's clear, Stuart.
Thank you, Director David. Before we go to CEO Horn, Manager Wolf has a response.
We have at this point no intentions to purchase it, nor does the City of Nelson have any interest in selling the property. Further to that, this is a property that used to be an old landfill, so I don't think we would ever be in the business of purchasing a contaminated site. Further to that, we have laid out the intended strategy to ideally expand the Groman site to house a single depot for the region. And we have the initial study underway to determine what a cost of that would be and how feasible that is. And we will come back before the end of this year with anticipated cost of that and recommendations if and how we are going in this direction. So the intent is that within a few years, we are off this property and have a single depot at Groman, which would have a couple of advantages for us. Other than the lease cost, we do have a single site, so we have reduced staff. Instead of staffing 2 sites, we have a single site. So the operations are more centralized. It has the disadvantage that some residents will have a longer ride to get to the depot, but at the same time, for many people that bring their own garbage to the transfer station, they can't do both of that at the same time. Did I forget something?
Supplemental, Chair.
Just before you go to your supplemental, Director David, you were directing that question at CAO Horn. CAO Horn, do you want anything to add to that?
I think through the chair, the only thing I'll add is staff would never endeavor to negotiate land purchases without strict direction from the board. So it's not something that we would do just as part of our regular negotiations without direction.
Okay, supplemental, Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Director David, I'll put your supplemental.
Are we receiving a contaminated waste site discount on this lease?
Are you really expecting an answer? But
No, Chair, tongue in cheek, sorry. That's a Jackman joke.
Jokes about it.
okay, Director David, I'll move on to the speakers with Director Cunningham. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yes, of course, the question that it was a formal landfill, and in fact, we used to lease it for $1, and it was a joint service, and we are still apparently responsible for some of the rehabilitation of that site at some time in the future. I seem to recall numbers gone from 30,000 to 300,000 to 1.2 million. I have no idea what's happened with that, and I understand discussions between the city and the district have not happened for some time.
Yeah, please. So it's probably good for everyone to know where we are with the site. So we are doing investigations jointly with the city in regards to the contaminations. It's a very complex site because we have ultimately more than one property. We have with CP another party, CP and the city. City held originally the permit that wasn't transferred to the RDCK. And when we talked to the Ministry of Environment about the remediation of this specific site, they insisted that we look at everything, which, I mean, where do you stop? Likely at Cottonwood Creek, but you can go a lot longer ways in regards to defining what the original landfill was, but it certainly extends onto the public works site that a city has. So it's a very complex issue. It forced us to do longer-term monitoring in order to determine multiple elements of contaminations on site with multiple different sources that we are trying to figure out who owns what and how this site to be remediated.
supplementary. I understand that the site still used by the city is a site that they use for mixing salt and sand. Is that correct? Yeah, road winter use.
Yes, the winter road materials are still on the northwest portion of that site. There's a couple of other uses there too, and we have been in the past in exchange with the city in regards to that use.
And the supplementary, the wells on that site, some of them have been there for 50 years. And I am aware of that. Okay, well, because right after 1975, so close enough to 50 years. They and at that time, of course, the amount of hydrocarbons, etc., have actually been dropping. I haven't heard any results for the tests, any of the well tests for years and years and years. I'd really like to know where we are right now with the status of what's happening in the area of natural remediation and what kinds of hydrocarbons, or because after all, CP used part of the site, they also left diesel oil and other contaminants on part of the site. So the whole thing, I agree, is a big puzzle. But I'd like to know exactly where we are with that kind of thing, because if eventually there's going to be something done, it'd be very nice, I think, for all of us to know exactly what's necessary.
Good. Thank you, Director Cunningham. Good to hear the history. And I will turn to Manager Wolf for a response.
Can I suggest that we bring in the next central, or if it's of interest to everyone, Joint Resource Recovery Committee meeting, a brief update report where this remediation and environmental monitoring project, that's roughly what it is, where it sits and what the results to date are.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got 3 more speakers on the list. We'll finish this item with the 3 speakers that are there. Then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll continue on. So Director Lockwood, go ahead.
Thank you. I would first like to correct, everybody keeps saying 43,000, it's actually 49,000. 49,367. And it's gone up 21,000 for a contaminated site that we're sharing. And I have heard at this committee and just recently that we are still looking at closing this site. Do we actually have a date on when we're going to close this site?
Good question.
Closing of site, meaning moving the recycling off it. We don't have a fixed date. We are waiting for the cost results of the study. Obviously, you will have to authorize as a board if we take the move to establish a single depot, because it will be a significant capital investment. So once that study is complete, we will bring the results back for your decision making with staff recommendation where we are going with a potential amalgamation of these 2 depots at the Roman site.
Okay.
Do you have a supplemental?
Maybe just a comment that Samo was only getting $77,000 in a year, and this is wanting 3 times more in an increase. So I am opposed to this.
Thank you, Director Spank.
Thank you, Chair. Through the staff, who determines the assessed value? Is it through BC assessment? Or do we have a copy of the assessment from BC assessment?
I don't know, Accounting, I don't know if you have seen anything else than the correspondence.
No, I haven't seen the actual document. It was just suggested through the City of Nelson, and they outlined how they calculated this formula, and that's always been used in the past. So they are adopting the same percentage, and they mentioned that was discussed between RD in the past.
Okay, so supplemental.
Just supplemental. An assessment is a document. It's something that's known. It's something that's either done by someone independent or as a mathematical calculation. It's based on facts. And without that, we don't know if we're being gouged or if we are getting a good price. And I have my own suspicions on that particular aspect, but
Sure.
I think before we proceed, we should have that information in regards to what the actual assessment of the property is, how that's determined. And that would help us make a decision on this.
Okay, well, thank you, and I see Manager Wolf writing that down.
I have it right here if you want it.
Oh,
The assessment?
The
Yeah, so-
assessment for 70 Lakeside Drive Nelson is $45,500 according to BC assessment.
So the calculations are wrong.
70 Lakeside Drive Nelson, 45,500.
okay, so just,
Sorry.
back a minute. The question that was asked about the assessment, is it BC assessment or is it an individual appraisal that goes out there and does the assessment? And there could be a big difference in price. Haven't gone through this before myself. So according to our board chair, she looked at the BC assessment records, I gather, and provided that number of assessment, the dollar number for the assessment. Staff has recorded that, and they are, I would presume, look into it and see what are we being charged, what assessment we're being charged at. So that hopefully will satisfy your question, Director Schmank, and we'll get that information back. How we're going to get that information back, I'll leave it up to the Manager Wolf. Does that satisfy your concern?
It does. And what's the last speaker?
The Director Page is after you, so go ahead, continue.
Question is, how do you make a decision if you don't have all the information? And is it a deferral motion?
Okay, so that would be a question to Manager Wolf. Is it?
Because the reason I say that is because I don't know if there's time constraints and those types of issues.
Okay, I'll go to Director Page first before we entertain a referral. Go ahead, Director Page.
So I'm not opposed to putting a request out to the city and working the numbers through and getting some actuals underneath to say, and come back to the board and say, oh, how is this determined? I will say, over the last 2 terms here, that the policy we have in place is a component percentage, I believe, 5 or 10%, depending on the entity of assessed value. That's where those numbers typically come from. That's where I believe the numbers will come from when we get the answer back on specifics on this one, and whether it's been Selkirk College or the civic or recreation pieces. We have been consistently applying places where there was $1 here, $1 here, $1 there, and over time we had to go through and say, you know what, we can't have KSA be rented out further for $1 for many more decades. We can't have the civic components and paces. Civic I even bring up because obviously a building that predates the regional district, a benefit project for the district that we in perpetuity continue to carry. And we have had to go through and say, where are we? See, how can we consistently? The Christian school ran into the same thing, a building we were taking care of, and we said, this is what it actually takes to do asset management on these pieces. And we applied the consistent policy once more. So I think it's always good to go test those numbers with each other. I think what you will find at the other side of those numbers is a set of principles that we are evenly, consistently as an organization applying across all of the pieces that we hold to the benefit of the district.
Thank you, Director Page. So
and I support this.
A referral would be in order. Director Schmank, a seconder for the referral?
Now we're going to answer the time question.
Director Lockwood on the propriety of referral.
To the time, Chair.
Refer to the next joint resource recovery meeting
What are the impacts though?
on
It's expired.
propriety of referral. Director Page, when you're talking, we could become garbled to everybody else. Yes, Director Page, on referral.
I know
Propriety of referral.
I know it should be okay. Well, then on referral, this is an expired lease. So are we?
Okay.
That was a question that Director Schmidt.
Good question.
To know.
Thank you, Director Page. I did ask that question to Manager Wolf, by deferring it to the next joint resource recovery. Will that present any problems or concerns to the regional district or the city? No. Well, I shouldn't say RDC, we can't speak for the city also.
Exactly, and it is the response from the city of Nelson in regards to further deferring to conclude an agreement that's actually already expired. So I can only guess how it is being received by the city, but at the same time, I totally understand that you want all the facts at the table to make a decision. So yeah, I can't say much more than the city may not take favorable to that, but at the same time, I understand that you want completed information before you make a decision.
So, thank you. I will go to CAO Horn. Do you see any problem with us deferring it to the next joint resource recovery meeting?
Through the chair, I guess in principle, there's no, if you're looking for further information to justify the dollar that they've arrived at based on the inconsistencies you've seen to get clarification, I think that approach is fine. I do think that there's definitely some, mid to long-term operational risk if we keep pushing this down the road while we try to get our ducks in the row for other options. But I don't see any immediate risk.
Okay, well, thank you. And Director Page, you're privy to the conversation. You'll be at the council meeting, and hopefully you'll convey why we are deferring it to the next joint resource recovery to get more information on it. It's not that we are hesitant to pay that amount or whatever the case is. So on proprietary referral. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Recorded, so we don't record in committee. So Director Page is opposed, and virtually I don't see anybody opposed there. Motion is carried. And it's deferred till the next joint resource recovery meeting.
March 11th.
March 11th. Okay, now we will take a break. 10-minute break. Back by 2:40.
Sure. Now that we're taking a break, the next recommendation doesn't have a dollar sum in it. Perhaps that's the winner.
Doesn't, I'll just put you on mute while we take a break.
Third one?
Chair, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yes, Maria, go ahead.
I have another meeting right at 3, just so you know.
Okay, thank you.
So I will be here, but I will be leaving right at 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, directors, I'm calling the meeting back to order. I believe everybody had a chance to take a little bit of a break. And we had our secretary finally back at the computer. Our sympathies. So anyways, we have recommendation number 2, Central Subregion. And because it is a Selmo issue, and I will ask Director Lockwood to read the recommendation. She recommended some changes to the recommendation, and she will read that out for us. Go ahead, Director Lockwood.
Yeah, it is 0.
That the board authorize the renewal of the lease contract with the Village of Salmo for the Salmo Recycling Depot for the term of July 1st, 2020 to July 31st, 2025. Sorry. With proposed rental fees of $566.80 plus GST per month, and subject to renewal of insurance terms, and further a 4% increase rate instead of 3%, and further that the cost be paid from service number A117 Central Subregion Recycling.
And you're moving that?
I'm moving.
And do we have a seconder? Director Schmink seconded. So does everybody understand, in the contract, it says, the Village of Salmo requests to amend the annual price adjustment clause to include, and initially it said 3% annual price adjustment rate, and Director Lockwood wants it to be 4%. So that's the change in the contract. Moved, seconded, and discussion. Director Lockwood, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just going to give an explanation of why we're doing this. A 3% to a 4% is only like $70 for the entire year. So I don't think going to break anybody's pocket. Although in this budget meetings in the Village of Salmo, we're actually paying for maintenance out of our, we've had a few people ram into the fence and break some locks and stuff like that. And our guys, our civic work didn't go and fix it. And so it came up that I was asking why this was in our budget. This shouldn't be in our budget. So that's where the extra $70 a year will come from. And 3% doesn't really cover the cost of what we're using. So we bumped it to 4% to just cover the cost. We are not making a single dime. Not a penny on this. We are not taking from the taxpayers to put into some coffers for anything else. And the insurance contract, what we need to do is we need to just clean up some language, and that's why that's in there. And staff and my staff will work on that.
Thank you, Director Lockwood. And I see you're pretty passionate about that. And that's the Mayor of Salmo. So anyways, further discussion. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing no opposition, it's carried. Now we have recommendation number 3, and it's to do with New Denver. Director Casely, do you want to read that recommendation and move it?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Or do you want me to read it for you?
It's coming up, I think. I got it. No, you'll have to read it actually, Walter. I can't seem to.
Okay. So that the board authorized the renewal of the lease contract with the Village of New Denver for New Denver Recycling Depot for the term of June 14, 2020 to June 15, 2025. And further, that the cost be paid from service A118 West Subregion Recycling. And you're moving that?
Yes.
And a seconder? Director Witt.
Discussion?
Director Hewitt? You're seconded and you already started discussion.
Yes.
Go ahead.
If I may, please, Chair. I'm just wondering, given there's such a huge disparity, I know that the property size will be way bigger in Nelson, but given the discussion regarding the Salmo lease,
and trying to get some cost recovery. I'm sure it's not free for the village of New Denver to host that site, because there's probably cleanup, unless the RDCK actually goes and does that cleanup at whatever cost. I'm just, I'm not the village of New Denver, but I just don't think that it's fair for them to receive nothing, given the other two contracts that we have just passed motions to renew.
Thank you, Director Hewitt. We have a response from Amy. Go ahead.
Through the chair, my understanding is that property is a licensing occupation or be otherwise a lease. So from my understanding, I don't know that they're able to charge a rental on it. That's the impression that they passed on us. So the snow removal services are contracted separately. So essentially we're occupying, it's not their property. Director Keasley has more information on that, but we are looking to access power from there, and then we would pay for that.
I mean, then my supplemental would be, if they don't own it, why are we signing a lease with them for property that they don't own? One would think.
So, do you have a response?
Have an audio issue, sorry. Amy, if you can just speak more directly to the owl, Director Main cannot hear very well.
Maybe I could help you, Amy. If you like.
Yes, please.
We hold a lease, an occupational lease with Crown Land for that. We're in the process of purchasing it, not in discussions of, it's a long drawn out affair over years of, it was supposed to be given to the village through taxes not being paid, and it never did happen. But the long story short is that we do not, we hold an occupational lease. We have our pump houses and all kinds of other stuff on this property. So we're not looking to add to the service. We're looking to keep the service as cheap as possible. And we're not charged anything. So we're not charging the regional district anything other than the fact that hopefully we can provide power so that the attendants can have lights and quit running on propane and have electric heat, which the attendant sites are already set up for, and work together and just charge for whatever the costs are that we actually occur.
So thank you, Director Paisley, and I trust that answered your question. So if there was a charge for that lease, New Denver would be part of paying that charge for that lease. And it would be West Resource Recovery that would be paying for that lease. And in all fairness, a good question. Thank you. So Director Cunningham.
Thank you. Good recommendation, of course. I think I would prefer really the recommendation that there will be no charge, no lease charge for the property. However, the district will be responsible for the cost of power and water or some such thing, as it mentions in the items down below on page 1.
Thank you.
People understand that. Guess what? Denver's being really good and not cutting anything for these costs, but we still are going to pay for the water and power that we use.
Could you
possibly be put into the recommendation? I am not the mover. I am not the seconder. I'm just suggesting it be there for the point of clarity, especially when everybody else is getting dollars for their sites.
Thank you, Director Cunningham. And I believe that would be a very good discussion for West Resource Recovery and how we were in the future. Unless you want to make an amendment.
I'll move to, I think it's a friendly amendment. I'll move it.
No, it's not a friendly amendment.
Okay, I'll move the amendment that the contract where we're going to switch from 160 to the regional one. Okay, be with the words added to that although there was no rental charge for the site, the district will be responsible for water and power.
Okay, a seconder to that amendment. Director Turney seconds it. And we'll have staff read out the amendment since it was not presented in writing. Director Watson,
No, sorry, you can
Huh?
pass staff the other thing, I was asking you from the speaker's list.
and put it in chat.
Then would you like me to read it out?
Yes, please.
Add further that although no rental fees are charged by the Village of New Denver, the RDCK will be responsible for utility charges incurred.
Okay, so, now we'll open up to discussion. Director Watson.
Yeah, I'm just through the chair to staff, I would believe that utilities are always separate from a lease agreement, and that we would be paying this regardless. So we don't get it named, or is it naming it so that the public knows we're still paying utilities?
Yeah, if I may.
Sorry, can I just get clarification from staff first?
Yes, go ahead.
Chair, it depends on the lease agreement. There are some where we have utilities and services and others that we don't.
This one doesn't have that. We pay them regardless. Outside of the lease.
Through the chair, we would pay them outside of the lease, it's just for the power used.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
The Director Bingham.
Thank you. Speaking in favor of the amendment, I'd like to find out, we know what's going on, but the public doesn't know what's going on. And I think if the public knows what's going on, I think they feel really good about what the village is doing for its their services, and also anyone else who reads this in the future will understand exactly what the possession is and why. And that kind of clarification always becomes really, really valuable. Like 25 or 35 or 50 years ago, as with the Nelson site, some of these things have gotten lost in the mists of time, and now we wish we had that information again.
Thank you. So, any other speakers on the amendment?
Page.
Director Page.
I don't think we probably thought we were going to spend this time here, but that's how these go. Given the conversation and the principle of central waste and how we are compensating these sites, I almost feel it would be best served to approach all the sites and figure out a formula that works across the board. Suspect we would use something like Nelson is using at a $6 million site. We're being charged about 1% to carry the cost, which is the appropriate VC assessment when we find the plan. Once that's been located, but if we were to cost it out of Stamel, that should be more like $3,500 a year. Which can help, well, it can be supportive, and if we're up in the cost and there's other considerations, I think the values and the partners, we should figure out an even hand on how we compensate for these sites because it makes sense.
Thank you for your comment. Just before Manager Wolf responds, I somehow recall looking at our recycling sites that we were going to provide power to New Denver and Crescent Valley. Am I wrong in that, or I believe it's in the budget? Yes, go ahead.
Through the chair, we will be getting a power service at Crescent Valley in spring here. And I don't know exactly when the one will be installed for New Denver, but it'll be a spring.
So it is in the budget then to provide the power. I don't know about the water, but the power anyways, that's part of utilities. So this would be, I guess, just like Dr. Cunningham states, it would be public information, but if the public is interested in the budget, it's already in the budget. So now I'll ask Manager Wolf to respond.
I just wanted to point out, not every site is the same, not every site history is the same. Specifically to the New Denver example, they originally started out to have a site at the Roseberry Recycling Transfer Station, and then New Denver and Sylvan at the same time rightfully said it would be better if it would be right in town instead of having to go out to the Roseberry site. And that's when New Denver offered up the site. So there's a little bit of history how we got there. The way we have since actually swapped site. It was originally a different one. So these sites have history that lead up to the form of agreement that we have. And I don't know that we would be served well to just try to have an equalized formula for each of these sites. Personally, I think that these differences play into the considerations.
Okay. Okay, so we have an amendment has been moved and seconded.
Director Main.
And further discussion when we have Director Main with the hand up. Go ahead, Director Main.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm echoing what Uli said. Not every site is the same. Not every site actually offers the same type of access. And there are different considerations to how each site has been identified and how they work for the community. So, it might look really good on paper to say we treat all the sites exactly the same, but it doesn't work in the real world.
Okay. Any further speakers? Nothing in chat? Okay, call for a vote. All in favor of the amendment? Okay, so we'll have to count. One, hold your hands up so I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and online 9. The amendment passes. The resolution as amended. Can we read that out?
You want me to read the whole thing?
The whole thing, please.
That the board authorized the renewal of the lease contract with the Village of New Denver for the New Denver Recycling Depot for the term of June 14, 2020 to June 15, 2025, and further that the cost be paid from service number A118 West Subregion Recycling, and further that although no rental fees are charged by the Village of New Denver, RDCK will be responsible for utility charges incurred.
Thank you. On the main motion, all in favor? Anybody opposed? No opposition. Carried. Central Subregion Recycling Services, a draft letter, City of Nelson, for review. So we'll start with staff. Amy?
Chair, this is in follow-up to the report we brought to committee in November to review recycling in the central subregion, largely looking at depots versus curbside programs. And I'm not going to revisit that report. We went through that quite a bit in November. It was attached for reference with the letter. And so there was a recommendation or maybe direction to staff to respond to the city formally regarding their November 2019 letter. So this is a draft for committee consideration, and then we finalize it or bring it back for a second review. So the letter references the City of Nelson's letter. It references the recommendation from the joint and addresses a couple of the components of the letter and points from the City of Nelson's letter, the study and from the City of Nelson's letter. So I'm happy to take any feedback or direction to finalize the initiative.
Thank you, Amy. I don't have access to eScribe because I'm monitoring chat, etc. But I believe the letter is in eScribe for comments. Okay, so the letter is there. I trust everybody's read it. And any comments on the letter?
Seeing no comments, the letter has been received and there's no motion associated with that item.
Through the chair, would you like to recommend that the letter be sent? Is already in there, so I guess we're good to send it off then. Okay.
So I didn't hear you. Do you need a recommendation to send that letter?
No, we've already gotten the motion.
Just provided for information.
Don't quite show other.
Just a note, yeah, so we already made the motion to send the letter. We included in that motion that the Village of Castle doesn't get a separate letter, but gets a copy of it and a report, so just clarifying that. And just from a procedural perspective, I do need to note that when we're writing letters to external entities, especially partners and, ministries, we generally don't put them on the agenda. And if we ask you to do that, that's our fault, because it's a little unfair to the recipient having it published before they've seen it. So I think practices in the future and some of the stuff that we prepare for ministers, we don't put on an agenda until after we've approved them. And I think we may have asked you to do this, so that's our fault. But apologies to the city of Nelson, because generally, I don't think this is best practice.
Thank you. Any further comments?
It's hard to open this.
Working on it, right?
You guys, however.
Comments at the board table are generally not appreciated unless it's through the chair. But it was a little bit of a humor. It was a different term from Director Jackman's. So no further comments on the letter or whatever the letter. We did move a motion. From what I understand, the letter is going to be sent and the chair is authorized to sign the letter.
Fine away.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item number 7, extended producer responsibility program concerns. And Amy, you're up.
Yes, thank you. So across the board table or committee table, last year, there was a few comments about addressing a letter to the province in regards to concerns. And sometimes they were really focused on Recycle BC, and sometimes they were on other EPR programs or just that in general. Even the household hazardous waste came up, and that for the large part does have a lot of EPR ties to it. So I'd like to point out that there's a lot of things underway in the province in regards to this, and I just participated in the BC Product Stewardship Council meeting just yesterday, and a few of these things have been on the agenda as well as other ones. And so one of the things that they're doing right now is an accessibility standards review. They've already completed the initial phases of that, and it's a pretty interesting, they hired a consultant called Eunomia to assess the reasonable accessibility standards, and it's looking at different types of products, different types of locations. There's a whole assortment, and they've developed a tool that you can kind of plunk in what the material is, where the people are, and how far they should access it. You can kind of assess where these services are and if they're meeting the standards. So the ministry was on this call, and they addressed that they will have a discussion paper issued this spring to identify how they plan to use the tool, essentially. So that I just wanted to give an update on that. Also,
They'll do case studies.
Sorry.
Selected.
Yes, correct. So that they're looking to start implementing the use of that tool.
They would not have heard you. So what you said, you need to say it loud enough that Al can hear you. Sorry.
To supplement on what Amy mentioned about Eunomia study is that they are trying to conduct a framework case study coming soon, early this year, so they can select some regions to implement this model, and just trying to get more information on how actually this would work in the real life.
And
the acronym?
Eunomia, EU, I can spell it out in the
N-O-M-I-A.
So, staff, Director Page. So are you finished with your comments, Manager Olson?
Nope. Continuing on. Another thing they had was an ICI working group, and they tasked a number of participants from a variety of stakeholders, people in the hauling industry, people in local government, and they completed an ICI assessment. We just got a copy of it in the last week or so. And the one member who's from the Caribou Regional District that we've engaged with the most on it, her words were, there's nothing groundbreaking in here. Please don't get your hopes up, but it has some recommendations in it. And from my understanding, that is, again, going to be continued to be worked on. The ICI assessment was part of the province's 5-year action plan. So it is following along with the timelines addressed in that action plan. So, but they don't have any firm outcomes. What I keep hearing echoed is it's very complex, and it might be, the recommendations are looking at a variety of solutions, and some of them are not a standardized fit across the province. And so how would they move forward on this? And I'm sure that there's lots of waste industry reps that are not keen to see ICI come in because it could compete with their business. And then there's others, I think, that are quite keen to have it come in. So essentially, and one thing that they pointed out, which I thought was very interesting, was the Revelstoke Chamber of Commerce recently met with the minister, and they had a very productive conversation, and they felt like they got across their challenges in dealing with ICI in more remote rural areas of BC. So I just wanted to point this out that we're not the only ones finding challenges with this, and it is being discussed across the board, or across the province by a lot of other local governments as well as businesses, so that the province is hearing these concerns. The other item that's underway is an incentive review with Recycle BC. So I've reached out to them before we had in advance of this meeting. They clarified that they're continuing to go through some studies. They said at this meeting yesterday that there's going to be a cost study completed at the end of July, and they hope to have their intention is to have something back for September, because a lot of the regional districts have contracts that are expiring at the end of December, so that there's so that we'll have these new incentives to build in for the new contract starting on January 1st. And that's their intention that they stated in their response just a week or so ago, is that they are continuing to consult and that they will have these new incentive rates at the beginning of 2025. So there is a lot moving forward on all these things that are plaguing us. And so I think a letter, another thing they talked about was piloting, and I think that was in regards to the ICI.
Yeah, the chair. So one thing that they really wanted to specify is that through the working group for ICI, with all these other regional districts and the manager of waste solid management from Caribou, they specified that instead of commenting on the whole ICI sector, we can specify some smaller businesses or schools or some, like specific ICI group that's currently included in an ICI, but those ones who are actually generating exactly the same packaging, paper, materials as the residential, then province might have more solutions to that much quicker than including as a whole, like really massive organizations. So that's what they really wanted to comment on during the conversation, and I found this really effective if we did that approach for myself.
So, and then continuing just briefly, I think the point of bringing this all up is I think this is a great opportunity to voice our concerns and our issues and some of the items about the high costs and the low access and concerns on accepting more EPR programs under our wing. I think this is a great time to do it because a lot of the stuff is still under consultation. I want to warn everybody that we're going to get the immediate answer. I think they're going to say, yes, we're looking at that. But I think that this is a great opportunity to really make a really clear message about our concerns in regard. So I put this framework together with consultation with other staff, and what we have heard from the table over the last year. This is sort of the highlights that I think have come across the table from either the committees or from staff. we wanted some feedback. Do you want to conclude the whole list? Do you want to focus on something in particular? Is there anything missing from this list that you want to add to it? The intention would be that we'll take your input and create a draft and ideally bring it back to the next committee. The next committee meeting is a shorter rotation, so hopefully we have time to pull all the information together. But then we can bring a draft back, not on the agenda, for your consideration, and then we can issue it to the province following that. And I think if we can get it out in the next few months, then it'll be well timed for, consideration for all these things that are already underway.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The ministry did confirm yesterday during the meeting that they are including pressurized tank as they proposed, and that's actually going to be launched in 2025, and it's confirmed. And this includes the spray form sealant that Todd and myself presented in the last Joint Resource Recovery Committee. Those sealant that includes really toxic form, that would be also included. So that was a really good news to hear.
So thank you. So when I read you're looking for input from the board on this, and you've given us a lot of information here. And it would be greatly appreciated if directors don't do sidebar between one another or whatever, or ask questions of staff. Direct your questions through the chair so everybody can hear what your question is and the answer is. So I've got a speakers list now. We've got Director Page, Director Watson, Director Jackman, Director Davidoff, and Director Cunningham. So we'll go to the Director Page. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. My only comment is that you would have all received an email because the ministry has asked for feedback from elected officials on circular economy pathways for the implementation of Clean BC. If there's stuff within this that can be sent to the AKVLG before February 23rd, we can incorporate that feedback in. We're going to be priming that ministry before this other letter is ready, and also hitting the ministry. So, but you have until the 23rd.
Thank you, Director Page. Good information.
That could be less.
So Director Watson.
Yeah, a couple notes in terms of feedback for the letter. And this might just be your side notes, but the 1 million for recycling is only in Central. I believe it's closer to 2 million across the regional district.
So before you continue, a response from me.
Through the chair, what that number is when we take, it is the whole district, and it's an assumption. All the numbers will be a little bit more precise in the letter. It is with the total value from all subregions, less the incentives and less the ICI hauling. Okay. When I passed that number on to Recycle BC, they did say, does that include satellite? And I said, yes, but we considered that the cost of delivering the service in our district. So they may or may not. And then that is, I think, another 200,000 or so. So.
Okay, so does that answer your question?
Well, I have a few more.
Okay, go ahead.
It does answer my question on the 2 million. I think it's important to note in terms of them not considering satellite services. By all means, use Marblehead as an example where because they're 40 kilometers close to Caslow, they can't be a core depot, but we do have Lakeside Depot in the middle of Nelson, which is definitely not 40 kilometers. Their threshold is 60 kilometers. So I think their metrics are subjective and they don't consider the context of the area. And then my last comment was, it would be great to include our previous letters of advocacy on this item as a small file, because it's been about, I don't know, since I've been here at least. And also that at UBCM this year, we requested to be a pilot area. So including the UBCM briefing for 2023, indicating we were putting our hand up to be a pilot in that realm. And I believe it was specific to ICI. So that would be my answer. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Director Watson. Director Jackman.
Thank you. Through the chair, part of my question overlaps with the previous question about the 1 or 2 million, and I still want to question a little bit because as I see it, say we take West Resource Recovery, it's moving into A118, for example, the fluctuates, let's say $580,000. The incentives are also housed in 1A118. They're not showing West Resource Recovery. So I think we can't say less the incentives, because the incentives are housed in 8116, 8117, 8118. They're not deducted from the taxation subsidy, and they're substantial. And then I did go looking further for other costs like hauling your stuff on behalf, but I think there's an adjustment there. We are over the million, I'm pretty sure that can be checked. But I like your 5 bullet points. I think are right on the money, and I find it encouraging. The other thing, the one your third and fourth bullet points, high cost of household hazardous waste, low and no service for many EPRs, and our failure to be able to establish failure to be able to establish interest in operating a subsidized eco depot in our second and third largest community really has to be simply a reflection on the EPR stewards who don't seem to want to, they have discouraged industry from stepping up. So if you work it into one or the other, or if that becomes a separate bullet point, I think that really shows how poorly industry in our area receives treatment they get from the stewardship groups.
Okay. Thank you. We've got Director David off.
Perfect timing, Chair. I move that the RDCK submits an invoice in the amount of $1 million to the province of British Columbia, Recycle BC, and any other appropriate entities to recoup the annual cost paid by RDCK ratepayers for recycling costs beyond RBC program incentives that should be fully funded. So moved.
So you've got me flat-footed here. Are you making a motion, Director David, or you want that included in the letter?
I'm making the motion so that it be included in the letter, but it should be a motion. And then if it's supported, then it can be included. The invoice could be included with the letter. We've been talking about this for like ever.
So I don't know if that would be the appropriate procedure in this case. So in other words, if you make a motion to include your suggestion, then I would then go back and ask every director that made a suggestion to make a motion on their suggestions. So we can get really convoluted here. So I'll go to CEO Horn if he's still on here, what we do with the process on the director's request to make a motion.
Through the chair, Director Davidoff made a motion. If someone seconds it, it would be on the floor for debate unless the chair ruled it out of order.
Okay. And your motion, Director Davidoff?
It's posted in chat that the RDCK submits an invoice in the amount of $1 million to the province of British Columbia, Recycle BC, and any other appropriate entities to recoup the annual costs paid by RDCK ratepayers for recycling costs beyond RBC program incentives that should be fully funded. So that's the motion. If there's a seconder, I'll speak to it.
There's a seconder to that motion?
I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
And as chair, I ruled that motion out of order.
I challenge the chair.
Sure. Okay, so the chair has been challenged. What is the process? We just went through that process. So we'll have a vote. If the chair is sustained, then we'll not deal with it. If the chair is not sustained, then we'll deal with it.
You need a 2/3 in favor.
Simple majority.
In favor.
Through the chair, simple majority for sustaining the chair.
Small majority to sustain the chair. So I'll ask for a vote. Who's in favor of sustaining the chair's ruling? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anybody else on? 7, 8. Chair is sustained. Out of order, Director Davidoff.
So Chair, you have 8 in favor of.
We will entertain your comments now.
Point of order, Chair. You have 8 people sustaining the chair. That's a majority, simple majority.
I think that was more than 8, but we will do that again.
Somebody up there voted not supposed to.
So who is opposed?
To sustaining the chair?
This is the chair.
Sustaining the chair.
Opposed or in favor of sustaining the chair?
Through the chair, vote in favor.
So go ahead, CEO Horn.
If those online could use their hand raising function, and then you can count the ones in the room, you can get it done pretty easily.
Okay.
This is to
So we'll do the
sustain,
board
sustain the
office
chair.
here. Vote is in favor
So
of
voting in
sustaining
favor
the
to
chair
sustain the
again.
chair.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a little bit different than it was last time.
You've got 4 on
Four in the
how many do you have
office.
in the room?
5, 6, 7 online. 8 total.
8 in the room?
No, 8 in total.
You only have 18 directors right now.
And we have only 18.
That's still not a majority. You need 9.
So the motion dies. Director
Sorry,
David.
there's only 17 directors.
Oh, 17 in the room.
We've lost Paisley, Maria.
Chair,
and
the
Tom Noel.
point of order, the chair is not sustained with 8 votes.
We'll put 17 directors in the room. And I'm number 9. The chair can vote.
So if it's a tie, the
So the
motion,
chair is sustained. Director David, chair is sustained.
okay, Chair, point of
Motion's
order.
out of order.
How many
So we will
directors,
take your
how many,
comment.
how many directors are present? How many votes are there available?
Shannon, you count how many votes are available?
How many are available to vote? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Sorry, I forgot, I can't stand up. Yeah, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15.
How many?
16 directors. There's 16 directors. 17, sorry, the Church Vandenberg was 17 directors.
So are you counting the directors that are already signed in also? Like,
Correct.
and like myself, I'm signed in,
Yes.
and I'm at 14? Yes.
Yeah.
So total 17.
Watson.
16, 17. 17.
And 9 voted to sustain.
There were 5 in the room that were sustaining the chair. Including the chair, okay, 4 online, so that's 9.
Okay.
The chair is sustained.
Thank you, Chair, for doing that. Now I'd like to comment then if I can, because I have the floor again, correct?
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The reason I made this motion, I would love to see this in our minutes, even if it's defeated. And the reason for that is I think we need to start doing some political action on behalf of our ratepayers to do things like this, to say, hold on a second here, we're not getting compensated by the province, Recycle BC, or whoever else is supposed to be doing it, to pay for the costs of recycling. And this has been going on forever. You remember MMBC, and then it was Recycle BC, and they keep changing the names of the organizations, but we're not getting the dollars that we need to pay for the recycling. Everybody promotes recycling, but they're not paying for it. Look at all the issues staff just raised. I think if we don't take political action or some form of political action, we're remiss in representing our ratepayers. And the bottom line is that is why I believe that we need to make statements like this. And yeah, some people might not like this, but it's political action. Aren't we politicians supposed to take political action on behalf of our ratepayers? That's what this is. So I don't know why it scares anyone.
Sorry, Director David, I will interrupt you. Are you speaking to the motion that has been not on the floor to talk about?
Chair, I'm
or
talking.
Are you making a suggestion to staff to include in the letter?
I make a suggestion to include this in the letter.
So the motion was ruled out of order, so that cannot be included in the letter. So do you have any other stuff that is to be included in the letter? So if I can make a suggestion, I think most of us agree that we're not being compensated enough by Recycle BC for what we're doing. We are taxing a lot, but a notice of motion might be in order, or maybe a board meeting or a joint resource recovery meeting that'll be separate from the letter. And
Chair, I'll be making a note.
Let us write that letter and wait till we get a response, and then that would be a good suggestion on your part.
Yeah, I'm going to make. Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a notice of motion tomorrow at the board meeting, and it's not debatable that we do this. And at least it'll be on an agenda somewhere for people to look at. This is what we are potentially considering doing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, moving on to the next speaker, which is Director Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Since the province has changed and we no longer use plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, there's been a real run at the stores on cardboard boxes, as you may know. If you go into almost any grocery store, they say, would you take your groceries in a cardboard box? And of course, what that does means that we now have to get rid of the cardboard when we get it home. Which is that more or less better than the plastic bags? At least, I think we should mention the fact that we are now, because of the change, we are now taking care of the cardboard on behalf of the grocery stores who used to have to take care of it themselves. And also the other problem with the cardboard, as you know, we talked about it, I don't think I need to go over it, the fact about who pays and who doesn't, and who sneaks it in from the small communities and all of that stuff. Yeah, I think they need to be totally, as part of the reason why this whole thing doesn't work. This said.
Thank you.
Could that be included in the letter? Not quite the way I said it here.
Well, that's your suggestion. That will.
That was the part about.
Yeah, thank you, Director Cunningham. That is your suggestion for the letter, and I trust the letter will be brought back to us for review.
Good.
Any more suggestions for the letter? Director Smith.
One side doesn't fit all. You can see that in the notes.
Okay, Director Hanegraaff, you're on the speaker list. Go ahead.
And so I'm just really kind of confused by what happened there. And I'm probably out of order on this too, but are we not allowed to make a motion at a meeting? Are we restricted to only doing a notice of motion for a future meeting or amending an existing motion that's on the agenda, whether it's friendly amendment or not? Or I'm not familiar with meetings where you aren't able to organically make a motion. And so I want to understand it.
Okay, thank you, Director Hanegraaff. I'll ask the board chair to respond to your question. I mean, I do have an answer. I might not be correct, but the board chair has chaired more meetings than I have, so go ahead.
If generally speaking, you can make a motion in a meeting. It generally should be an item on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, that's where you draw the line, and you need 2/3 vote at the beginning of an agenda, add an item. So yes, that motion could be made. I think the catch is it relevant at this time or specific to the item enough? And that was what the chair had called differently. So yes, you can make a motion if it's an item on the agenda and it hasn't been added in without it being included in the agenda. You do not require a notice of motion. So the primary note is that it has to be already on the agenda as a topic. So yes, Director Davidoff could make that motion. The chair opted to indicate that it was out of order, not because he can't make a motion, but because of the context of it. And I don't know if Stuart wants to add to that.
So if you don't like the content of the motion, you can rule it out of order. Is that what I understand?
It's not necessarily not liking the content, it's its relevancy to the topic that is on the table. And so the chair opted to indicate that it was out of order based on the current conversation, which is sending a letter. And so the chair can make the call that it's out of order based on context, not that a chair should never make an out of order comment simply because they don't like it. That's not appropriate. It has to be based on context.
So I can, yeah.
Can I just say,
You're unmuted, Walter. There you go.
Can I just say that it wasn't clear to me why that was being ruled out of order. And I don't know if anyone else feels the same way or not, but I understood that it was ruled out of order. I don't understand why it was ruled out of order. And I think for us to vote not knowing why it was ruled out of order is, why are we doing that?
So I can try to clarify.
Your computer, no, it's Walter's computer is unmuted.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can probably clarify that to you, Director Hanegraaff, and CAO will correct me if I'm incorrect on that. We were discussing items to include in the letter and input from directors to include in the letter. That recommendation, in my opinion, as chair, was not an item to be included in the letter. That is why I suggest that Director Davidoff bring it up as a separate item with a notice of motion. Because we're not discussing recommendations, how much they owe us or that, or how much they should pay. It was items to include in the letter. It was a suggestion rather than a recommendation. That might have been different, but it was a recommendation. So CEO maybe can expand on that.
Through the chair, I think the crux of it is the words that you to say, in your opinion, as chair. And that's really what it comes down to. It's up to the rest of the assembly to determine whether or not it should be ruled in order, and the vote failed. So that's really, Director Hanegraaff, where it sits, is that it is to some extent at the full discretion of the chair. And that's where the rest of the committee would keep the chair in line by not sustaining the chair and allowing the motion to be debated. In this case, it wasn't.
Yeah, and believe me, I understand the purpose of challenging the chair and how that all works. Not actually my first rodeo. Thanks for the explanation, everyone.
Okay, so we're looking for further comments. I had you on the list, Director Cunningham. Did you speak?
Yes, I spoke, and I mentioned the problem with the cardboard and the way in which it's working, with the fact that we end up paying for it one way or the other, even though many businesses are supposed to. Because of the reason being, of course, because now we've eliminated single-use plastic bags. So the stores are using boxes to get rid of them, so they're killing two birds with one stone. They don't have to pay for the boxes when they get them, and we're getting rid of them for free.
Okay, thank you.
That's the case, a bit in order. It's in order.
So Director Smink, did you want to say?
I already spoke.
Okay, thank you. Any more speakers? I don't see anybody online. Nobody in the boardroom with Director Page. Go ahead.
Just part of the conversation, I don't know if it generates work for staff, but a bit of maybe less of a 1 million a year, but more of a costing possible to produce something that gives them a bit of a history of what that cost gap has been. Because I agree that inducing into the action of invoicing the province is one whole piece of activity, but providing financials and history that doesn't then induce a bunch of costing and impact our work plan too much. I'd like to provide a good history of how much we've been subsidizing this unclosed loop.
Thank you, Director Page, Director Smith.
Chair, I think in the past, when we dealt with the several different head organizations that we had to deal with, we really couldn't find out the numbers. And by the numbers of how much are they being paid, how much are they being recycled, the details so that you can actually make a challenge to what they're doing. It was just a contract with the provincial government. And we didn't know how much was coming in, how much was going out. I'm curious if that could be clarified, because it would certainly keep people's feet to the fire.
Okay, thank you. I believe they made a note of that. Any more speakers on that? See nobody in chat, nobody in the board office. We'll move on to the next item. Number 8, which is the draft financial plan services 187 and 117. The following revised draft 2024-2028 financial plans have been received. And service 187 and service 117. So is there a motion to refer to the board?
I think it's just received for information and you just want to.
Okay, so, okay. Amy, go ahead.
Through the chair, so what was shared in the agenda, I'll share my screen quickly here. What was shared in the agenda is, it was condensed, so it was only the sections that were changed and they're highlighted in yellow. There's a couple of things that occurred here, specifically to 187, the Central Waste Service. There was some questions at the committee at the budget meeting about trying to smooth the taxation. So when we could do that without reducing costs, and so the only way to do that in 2024 was there's an HB short-term borrowing loan, and those are a 5-year loan. Normally, our practice is to spread it out over the 5 years to have it be the lowest it could possibly be. In this instance, because our taxation can be lower, expenses are lower in future years, we checked with finance and you can adjust, you can pay off that 5-year loan in any which way you want. You can pay it all off in the 5th year, you can pay it off in the 1st year, you can divvy it up in this year. The interest rate is charged per day, is my understanding. So we will see a slightly higher, I think it was about 10,000 higher in interest payments in 24, because it will be a higher amount that we carry through the whole year. But it does mean that we can reduce the taxation level for the Central Subregion from the 15% increase that was discussed last week down to a 5%, or sorry, 10% increase. So that's what's highlighted on line 9. Further down, the online 259 and 267 is demonstrating changing the repayment terms to the over 25 through 27 rather than a payment. So I think it was 360 over the 4 years, it's 477 if it's condensed to those 3 years. And you can see that the repayment would have been a little lower in 25 because we would have had less of a principal remaining. So that's what's reflected there. There was a modest amount of adjustment to the contribution to reserve when those changes were made, and that's shown on line 2889. And the item on 298 is highlighted. That's the transference and recycling service. I'll talk about that in a second. It's reduced because that service was adjusted to remove the Coconino Depot from it's directed. So that's the summary of the changes made in 187.
So in short, so that I fully understand, is normally when we have East, West, Central, the last meeting that we have before budget, etc., we recommend changes to the budget, etc., and then we pass a recommendation with the following changes to be sent to the board for approval. In this case, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there were some changes suggested. You did not have time to make the revisions. You made the revisions. Now you brought it back just for information purposes only.
Through the chair, correct, that we've entered this data as described into the financial plan that you will be discussing on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you. First, just to note, thank you so very much. You brought it down quite close to 200,000, and I really appreciate the 10% versus the 15 this year. There is a board motion tomorrow from Essential Resource Minutes that approves that agenda. So I think when we make that motion tomorrow, we should note that it's as amended at the Joint Resource Recovery meeting yesterday. The motion is there, and we'll note that it's a different amount than what was at the Central Resource Recovery meeting last week. And thank you, Amy. Just a really big thank you. I didn't notice it till mid-meeting.
So thank you, Director Jackman.
Yeah, this is a very interesting tool. So essentially, just to be sure I understand, because I'd like all department heads to understand this as well, it could impact recreation. You input out of the 5 years, the amount of principal you want to pay in each of any or all of those 5 years. And then the program kicks out the interest, which must be paid every year. Simple as that. So we could use this for recreation, for renovations of smaller sites, and many other, could be dangerous, but that tool that's available should be understood by every senior manager.
Just clarify.
Manager Wolf.
This is the case for short-term loans.
5 years, yes, understood. Very different from past practice.
Okay, so that was received for information. Thank you. So I actually omitted public time. When I take a look at the agenda, I think the public time called for 11:45 a.m. So good job.
Cool. That's probably because I had my mornings and afternoons mixed up.
Anyways, is there any public on the line for any questions? One more time, any public on the line that would like to ask questions? And no public in the room. So with that, I will ask for adjournment.
So moved.
I think we've got Director Jackman moves and Director Lockwood seconds. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. And thanks everybody for this meeting, etc., and getting me to chair it instead of Director Neal.
You did well as a substitute chair.
Yeah, and the best wishes to Director Neal if he's getting sick and hopefully recovers as soon as possible. We miss him at the table.
Maybe you're just sick because you like the budget.